Okay, here we go.
Let me just. Oh, and by the way, I was listening actually to most of your
Yeah.
conversation with Danielle, which was great. I printed out some stuff, some choice quotes that I'd be happy to share about Stephen Miller.
Oh, yes, please. If you
Yeah.
want to see a Muslim and a Jew team up against hate mongers, white supremacists, bigots, anti-Semites, self-hating Jews, self-hating Muslims, this is your show. We will not mince words, folks. We will hopefully piss off all the right people. Now, if you are white, welcome. I love white people. Some of my best subscribers are white people. In fact, most of you are white people who watch your show. White people are part of the multicultural coalition. Whites, Jews, Muslims, black people, brown people, Asian people. We are talking about fascists. We are talking about white supremacists. We are talking about hate mongers. We are talking about anti-Semites. If you are one of those people, the hate mongers, and you get offended, good. If you are not one of those people, relax. Have a cookie and a coffee and a chai and a Coke and join the rest of us. I'm with Debra Shushan, who is the editor of the fantastic. What's the name of your Substack, Deb?
The Debrief with Debra Shushan.
Debrief with Debra Shushan, and before that, she was also part of she's within these. She was J Street, where she had a leading role at J Street, and then since then she's now at Georgetown, where you have a very fancy title, which I always forget, but it's really fancy.
So it's like senior resident affiliate at the Center for Jewish Civilization. The exciting thing is I'm going to be teaching a class next semester. If you know, I think it's registration period right now. If you know anyone at Georgetown, you can tell them to take the class I'm going to be teaching, which is on Jewish Americans, U.S. politics, and Israel-Palestine, which is kind of my part of my bailiwick. So that's kind of what I'm up to.
And she knows she knows Israel and Palestine inside out. She's having really brave, bold conversations that I'm sure has pissed off people in her community. I piss off people in my community. And the genesis of why we talked this time and talking this time is because I did a post about 3 or 4 days ago. And Deb, you had a really good comment in the post. And the post was the following. I said, folks, I always try to be honest. Even though a majority of Muslims voted for Kamala, about 61%, some, like chickens for Colonel Sanders, voted for Donald Trump in every community, as you know. The reasons for voting for Donald Trump for some people were taxes. They thought, hey, I'm going to get richer. This won't affect me. I drink a mimosa with Karen. I golf with Chet. I drive a Tesla. Other people, some Pakistanis, said, I know that Donald Trump will release Imran Khan from prison in Pakistan, which was all BS. He's still in prison. Other folks had a very righteous rage against Gaza, against what's happening in Gaza and how the Democrats literally abandoned them. We've talked about this in the show and mocked them and ridiculed them. But others also, if I'm to be honest, bought into the divide and conquer technique of the trans panic, LGBTQ,
Mhm.
right? It worked like gangbusters in the suburbs. And they're making our kids gay. I'm like, who's they? And is your kid gay? No. So your kid's not gay? No. Is your wife gay? No. Is your daughter gay? No. Have you ever met a transgender person? No. But they're making our kids gay. Deb, I'm not even making up. I've had that conversation at least 12 times. It just
And if they are gay, Waj, God bless.
yeah, who cares? Like, are they bothering anyone? No, then relax. It's not personal in any way, shape, or form, right? So, I did that comment, and then Deb responded, and Deb responded in a very humane way, giving more context, and saying, though, but the Dems did mess up in the fact that they alienated so many people. They did not bring a Palestinian speaker to the DNC, which was such a terrible, terrible mistake. Many of those Muslims, Palestinians, Arabs still voted for Kamala Harris despite the rejection and the humiliation. But what's been happening is what you and I have been talking about, Deb, is for the past 2 years, ever since the terrorist attack of Hamas that killed 1,200 Jews, and since then the genocidal campaign of Israel, you and I have known, since we're masochists in this space, that hate mongers, white Christian nationalists, white supremacists, and people who do not care about Muslims and Jews would use this to promote, respectively, both Islamophobia and antisemitism as vehicles against democracy, both here and abroad. And now, Deb, as of this week, it's been supercharged. They're going after birthright citizenship. They're trying to denaturalize people. They're openly, Deb, using Nazi slogans. Nazi slogans, folks, like remigrate, which says that people like you and me because they hate Jews too, folks, should be ethnically cleansed from America. So that's a lot for table setting. But we'll spin the wheel and I defer to you and we'll go back and forth.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me watch. Lot packed in there, obviously, and these are, absolutely horrific times. I was listening to some of your conversation that you and Danielle were just having, which was great. And understandably, the name Stephen Miller came up quite a bit. And in terms of talking about members of one's community in which one can be horrifically disappointed and appalled by, Stephen Miller absolutely stands out for the vast, vast majority of Jewish Americans as a horror show that we cannot possibly understand for most of us. Happy to talk about him a little bit more, but I appreciated that post, Waj, and what you had to say in terms of kind of holding your community to account in some way. And that's a very admirable, obviously you spoke to, the Muslim South Asian community during the run up to the election and said, look, the Democrats, the Biden administration has gone in the wrong direction on certain things, in particular Gaza, which was really, and Israel-Palestine, which was a disaster. But you said very correctly that, a Trump administration is going to be immeasurably worse. It'll still be terrible on Israel-Palestine, and then it will be horrifically worse on everything else.
Yep.
You were absolutely right. But I did just want to add on that because I think this is really important for the future. Should we ever have free and fair elections again, which obviously there's a super big question mark as far as that's concerned. But there's a battle for the soul of the Democratic Party that's happening right now. And I think if we're not really honest about what happened in 2024. And it's great to see that some folks are coming out. Ben Rhodes just wrote an op-ed in the New York Times this past week, which basically,
Very
it
good.
details, where the Democrats totally went wrong on Israel, Palestine, Gaza. You spoke about the fact that, the Democratic National Convention couldn't even bring itself to have any Palestinians on the stage, which was, there were anyway, that was extremely for me, that was extremely painful to see because it was obvious that negotiations were going on, demands being made, and, still they couldn't find any kind of way to work that out. And the Harris campaign really neglected the Muslim American community, didn't try to do outreach in the way that they should have. And amazingly, Donald Trump basically stepped into that vacuum
That's
and
right.
went and,
That's right.
met Muslim communities in Michigan and managed to, convince it like, hey, he's here. He's here. The Harris campaign isn't here. And that spoke volumes. Now, of course, it was bullshit. It didn't mean anything. And it certainly has, obviously, it hasn't translated into anything positive for the Muslim community, far from it, in terms of, what the administration is doing vis-a-vis Somalia, Afghanistan, and, many other Muslim countries, not to mention Muslims who were born here and everything else. But I do think, again, we have to look back in order to hold ourselves in account and in order to not make those same mistakes all over again. And I'll just point out because I think someone, as we were having this little bit of a back and forth on Facebook, someone responded and made a comment about Hillary Clinton
Mm.
and the speaking tour that she seems to be on at the moment.
Ooh.
You
I
know,
want to ask you about that. You led me up perfectly. Please,
well,
for those who don't know, tell them. Tell them.
right. So Hillary Clinton is one of the folks, one of the, moderate Democrat. Her husband, of course, Bill Clinton, was president during the attempt to make peace between Israelis and Palestinians at Camp David, which failed. And Bill Clinton publicly faulted Yasser Arafat for the failure to make peace, and said that, basically lended credence to the comments that were made by Ehud Barak, the Israeli prime minister at the time, who said, there's no Palestinian partner. And so that's been his line, and I think really Hillary Clinton's line. She adopted the same messaging that, the Palestinians never actually wanted peace. And then she became, a very APAC-ish pro-Israel senator from New York, went on obviously to be Secretary of State. And now, for the last few years, she has been teaching at Columbia University, during which time she, that has been the place in which she has experienced October 7th and the aftermath of the genocide in Gaza, against the backdrop of students, I think protesting in some of her classes, certainly obviously protesting on Columbia's campus. And it appears to perhaps have kind of further radicalized her a bit, if we want to.
It is wild, Deb. Just tell him before she went to Doha. Can you tell him about the Miriam Adelson conference that she voluntarily agreed to speak at?
Yes.
Well, before you do, because
Yeah.
what's common to you and me isn't common to everyone. Can you tell everyone who Miriam Adelson is?
Sure. So Sheldon Adelson, who is Miriam Adelson's late husband, who made a fortune in, the gambling casino industry in Las Vegas, was an enormous. Together with Miriam Adelson, they were massive donors to the Republican Party. Miriam Adelson, has continued that after the death of Sheldon, continues to give, a ton of money to the GOP, Trump, MAGA, etc. Sheldon Adelson was American. Miriam, his wife, is an Israeli American, born in Israel. And through her, after they got married, the two of them became very, very politically involved in Israel, as well as here in the United States. Just to give you an indication of their politics as far as Israel is concerned, the Adelsons used to be a major donors to AIPAC. At a certain point, they stopped giving to AIPAC because it wasn't right-wing enough for them. So just to give you a sense of these folks and where their politics are. So one of the things that they used their, tremendous bank account in order to do, because they're also allies and have been allies for many years with Israeli right-wing Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, is that they actually started an Israeli newspaper that they bankroll, which is called Yisrael Hayom, which means Israel Today. The important thing, so this is a right-wing, pro-Bibi, pro-Netanyahu mouthpiece, and it's free.
Yep.
It's a free daily newspaper. And, there are many factors, of course, I don't want to simplify it, that have driven the Israeli public and Israeli politics to the right over the years. But one of those factors is that, you have this media source, this free available media source that is, pumped into the hands of Israelis every day, courtesy of the Adelson family. And that's driven Israel in part. That's been one of the factors that's driven it to the right. So anyway, every year, Yisrael Hayom has a big annual confab. And this year, for the first time, I take it, they decided to do one in New York.
Yeah.
This was a statement, right? Right after the election of Zoran Mamdani, they wanted to make a statement about having this conference here in the belly of the beast in New York, which is about to be, taken over by Muslim socialists and kick out all the Jews and all of that. I'm speaking tongue in cheek, of course. Anyway, so they have this conference, and it's fascinating to me looking down the list of all the folks who are speaking at this conference, and the one name that stuck out was, a former Democratic senator, Secretary of State, First Lady to a Democratic president, when the Adelson family are these major, major bankrollers of the right wing here in the U.S. and in Israel.
Deb, can I just say real quick how much money, for those who don't know, Miriam Adelson and her late husband Sheldon Adelson have given at least $600 million to Donald Trump since he descended the staircase and made racist comments against Mexicans. And specifically, she was, I believe, number two after Elon Musk, who gave nearly $300 million. She gave another $100 million with the specific intent that Republicans control Congress. Please continue.
And, and look, I mean, Miriam Adelson, I'm sure she, likes low taxes for billionaires. I mean, I'm sure that's a great thing in her book, as it is for most billionaires, except for, anyway. But the other thing that she really passionately cares about is the issue of Israel and blank check, unfettered support for the Israeli government, even if it's ultra right wing, et cetera. So anyway, so Hillary Clinton speaks at the Israel Hayom conference, and then she reprised very similar talking points at the Doha Forum. So she's like on some sort of a tour doing this, and her entire point, in a nutshell. And I have heard the same exact messaging, by the way, from Jewish communal organizations, the sort of legacy establishment organizations. She could get a job for one of them if she wanted to. I don't know why she would want to, but the messaging is that the minds of young people are being polluted because they receive all of their information from social media. Which, I mean, look, there's some truth to that. And I mean, I, as a professor, would certainly rather see, I want to see a highly educated youth, and I'm concerned certainly about the state of, young people getting a lot of their information from social media. But the point is, she says that is responsible for the fact that so many young people, including, and she mentions this, right, including young Jewish Americans, are highly critical of Israel, are moving away from Israel, are sympathetic to the Palestinian cause. For her, it's all because they are ignorant and just, seeing, uh, seeing their
brainwashed by TikTok. These young people, it's not because they saw a genocide in real time in their life. It's not because they became radicalized in real time. It's not because they were educated. It's not because they were seeing or hearing Netanyahu and Ben Gvir. It's not because they saw, Palestinians and doctors and nurses and UN workers getting killed openly for 2 years. Oh, no, no, no. It's the TikTok.
Right, right. And, look, Hillary Clinton, if you want to be upset that young people are seeing all of this on TikTok, let's talk about the fact that journalists were killed in massive numbers in Gaza. And so therefore, the mainstream media, I mean, the mainstream media may have been problematic in terms of its reporting of this in any case. But, there were limits to, in terms of the journalists who could actually be covering this through other channels on the ground. But listening to, and I listened to her entire interview with
So
Israel
painful. It was so
Hayom.
painful, Deb. So painful.
You know, she barely even used, I don't know if she ever used, but, barely even used the word Palestinian, Gaza, you know, let alone any sort of reckoning with what actually has happened there over the past 2+ years. And it was all, she was making the point. She was saying that, when she was Secretary of State and Senator from New York, that she told the Israelis back then that they had terrible PR and they had to work on their PR operation. And she's like, and it's just gotten even worse. And, I mean, there's absolutely no grappling at all with what happened, with the U.S. role in it. And so this is to kind of try to bring all of this full circle. I do think this is an absolutely crucial moment for the Democratic Party.
Yes.
And the question of whether we're going to learn the lessons I mean, I think you've had on your program Ro Khanna,
Yeah,
Congressman Ro
he's
Khanna.
coming back this week also. Yeah.
Fantastic. Fantastic. So, and, Ro Khanna, after Hillary Clinton made those comments, came out and said, don't insult the intelligence of young people and what they've seen with their own eyes. Right. And so clearly, and Ro is very interesting to me because, and I hope he'll come on the debrief at some point. He's very interesting to me because I worked with his staff when I was, in my previous role at J Street. And I'll just say, it's really interesting to me because there were certainly times, I was the head of our lobbying team on the Hill. And there were times when we tried to get Roe onto particular vehicles, letters, pieces of legislation, whatever that were, pushing the envelope a little bit to the left on Israel-Palestine. Sometimes he would get on and sometimes he wouldn't. We couldn't always get him on. And now what I'm seeing is Ro Khanna has actually moved to the left of J Street.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. And I think Ro is someone who is pretty good at putting his finger in the air and seeing which way the wind is blowing. And he sees, and that doesn't sound great in some ways. In some ways it's not, but the man's a politician. The man's a politician and he wants to run for president. And he understands which way the political winds are blowing, especially vis-a-vis the younger generations. And so this is really, and I give him credit for moving with the times. Because if really after these 2 years of what has happened in Israel-Palestine, you haven't reassessed, you haven't moved, then, there's a problem, right? There's a problem. So,
Sorry, continue.
no, so I mean, I think Roe represents one side, of what we're seeing with it. He's not the only one, but he's one side in terms of where the Democratic Party is going. I would point to Chris Van Hollen in the Senate on the same side, and there was a little. I don't know if you caught the kerfuffle that happened with Chris Van Hollen, which interesting. I didn't know if you would. I thought maybe that was too Jewish inside baseball.
No. I keep tracks, and I have Jewish friends who send it to me. Hadar Suskin sent it to me. You know Hadar.
I know.
So and Chris Van Hollen's been really on top of this for a while, and I'm like, it's a matter of time. Some of these legacy organizations, and I'm like, there you go. Now they're targeting Chris Van Hollen and Roe. But you said a lot, and it's perfect, and because it sets up this conversation of how can you defend democracy at home if you support fascism abroad. And what you basically have outlined is something that I've talked about a lot on the left hook. And I said this to Roe. This was with Roe before he called it a genocide. I challenged him right here. And Roe, being a politician, he said, well, Waj, let me challenge you back. Why is it so important to call it a genocide? And I said, I think you have to name something for what it is, first and foremost. And number two, I think what it does then is if you call it a genocide, then it invokes a moral and legal responsibility for the international community to intervene. And then Rose said, well, let me see what the United Nations said. And now he was just at an event that I was at last week. He now calls it a genocide. Your former boss, Jeremy, J Street came in. I pushed him on this show gently in a respectful way. And he said, well, okay, let me think about. I'm back. Here we go.
Great.
And then 2 days later, I came back, and 2 days later, he said, okay, well, I won't use it, but I understand why people have to use it. And I think you're seeing the shift. Folks, you've seen the numbers. Numbers don't lie. Israel currently has lost the youth globally. It has lost the culture. It has lost the narrative. It has lost the overwhelming, not even the majority, pretty much most Democratic voters. It has lost a big chunk of Republicans. I never thought it would happen, at least 35%, because people have seen a genocide in real time. I call this the Gaza generation. And what I've said, Deb, watching this and seeing the shift, which to you and me, we got the gray hair. I'm older than you.
I don't think you are.
Well, I look
You're
older
grayer than I am.
Yeah, we never thought this would happen. In 2 years, this is a remarkable shift in American politics, global politics. What I've said is for Democrats who are seeking a national spotlight, they have a few litmus tests. One of them is, do you still suck the teat of the oligarchy? Gavin Newsom said, yes, I do. But I digress. Another one, I believe, is Mamdani showed, Are you willing to throw the woke under the bus? Gavin Newsom said, yes, I will. Mamdani said no. But another one that I don't think the establishment is paying attention to, and this Hillary Clinton massive mistake, I think it's a massive political mistake she made, in addition to human rights mistake and ethical mistake, is Israel-Palestine.
Yeah.
There is this old generation, I'm not using old as a pejorative, that I believe like Hillary, like Sarah Hurwitz, like who was the White House Obama speaker, who said the same thing that Hillary Clinton said, same justification, the Joe Bidens, they're ideologically entrenched in the 20th century. They cannot evolve on this issue. They just can't. And they're doubling down, blaming the TikTok. They want the Ellisons to now take over. Ellison's hardcore supporters of Israel. The largest single donor to the IDF is Larry Ellison, who just bought TikTok. And once, just today, folks, they counterbidded Netflix's attempt to buy Warner Brothers with the hostile takeover. And they also took over Paramount CBS, right? So we'll just take over the media. We'll blame the kids. I don't think it's going to work. I think, Deb, a major litmus test for Democrats moving forward is Israel-Palestine. Do you still go with the old school Hillary Clinton, Biden narrative, or are you embracing where the people are? And this is where you see Mamdani, and this is a fear of mine that I want to talk to you about.
Yeah.
You saw Mamdani run circles around Trump, right? And Trump, though, ran circles around Schumer because Trump embraced Mamdani
Mm.
before Schumer and the establishment did.
Mm-hmm.
And that did not go unnoticed. Schumer still hasn't embraced Mamdani. Gillibrand still hasn't embraced Mamdani. Jeffries has still not embraced Mamdani. Trump gave him like verbal fellatio, pardon my mental image, because Trump's smart. He knows. He goes, oh, this guy's ascendant. Let me ride his coattails, right? The problem here, though, Deb, is especially what we saw in Doha this week. Hillary Clinton was invited. Double down, folks, in the international stage. You know who also was invited, folks? Which was shameful, but this is where we are. And people got to pay attention to this. And I want your thoughts on this because I don't think people are. Tucker Carlson was invited.
Yeah.
And Tucker Carlson, folks, and Candace Owens and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Nick Fuentes have been further to the left on Israel and Palestine than the Democratic establishment. Now, Deb,
Yeah.
I've been telling people this. They don't pay attention to me, but I'm like, trust me, this is what I do for a living. Like, I feel like a crazy person, right? I'm like,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
people follow social media, Instagram, TikTok. I went to another social event yesterday. Educated individuals, many South Asians, many Muslims. You know what they said? This Tucker Carlson, I think he's changing. This Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Yeah.
And I said, Nick Fuentes is a Nazi. They're like, is he though? I saw a clip, and my fear, Deb,
Yeah.
is the Democratic establishment
Yeah.
are not paying attention to where the winds are shifting with Tucker, Candace, Nick Fuentes, a Nazi. We'll talk about that in a second, and how they are deliberately courting a disaffected youth that hates the establishment, and they're courting them on Israel. They're courting them on America First, non-interventionism, and they're courting them on being anti-elite. And the Democrats are literally ceding the ground to this. I said a lot. Your take.
Yeah. So I have really been trying to educate myself, Waj, on what is happening, what the hell is happening within MAGA, within, you know, white Christian nationalist, Heritage Foundation, all of this stuff, trying to get my arms around what the hell is going on. And the more one looks into this, the more utterly disturbing it is. It's in my process of trying to educate myself, and when I do that, trying to educate my viewers here on Substack as well. I invited Tim Whitaker, who you may know of the New Evangelicals, which is an important organization. Tim is someone who grew up in a conservative evangelical background. And at a certain point, I think when he actually had his first gay friend who was out, who he actually knew was gay, started to question the evangelical movement. And it's brought him to this awesome place and basically trying to educate folks about white Christian nationalism and create another potential reality for evangelicals like himself who actually believe in the teachings of Jesus. and not what white Christian nationalism portrays those teachings to be. And so we did a great program together. And, and I asked him, I wanted to dig in with him and understand like what's going on with, this Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Nick Fuentes, MTG, with them suddenly like, talking about Gaza and, questioning blank check support for Israel and all of that. And what Tim, he's the expert, and what Tim explained to me was, look, these are folks who are, long time anti-Semites. I mean, we know that
There you go.
in particular, they're longtime anti-Semites who are trying to win people over to this belief, this cause that Jews control everything. Jews are behind all of the evil in the world. And so, and they realize that what happened in Israel-Palestine, over the past 2 years and, even longer, is a really potent issue that is speaking to even many, um, GOP white evangelical types who
Yep.
previously were raised in a milieu that was unquestioningly, pro-Likud, pro-Israel, and that's something that's been assumed. With evangelicals being really the greatest and most uncritical supporters of Israel in the United States, more than Jewish Americans, because there are many of us, many Jewish Americans, I'm not the only one, who will question, who will criticize, even if we, do it from a place of caring about Israel and wanting a profoundly different future for Israel.
Well,
Um,
and Deb, real quick, for those who don't know, what's common to us isn't common to everyone. Netanyahu gave up mostly on Jewish youth years ago, realizing full well that his base is white evangelical Christians and MAGA.
Absolutely. No, that's absolutely right. And it was Netanyahu, it was his, chief advisor, Ron Dermer, who used to be a Republican operative and has just left and I think is now going to work for Kushner. So he kind of bounced back and forth. And absolutely, I mean, he advised Netanyahu and said publicly, I mean, they're not hiding this. They said this publicly, that Jewish Americans, yeah, there's a certain core, the Adelsons, who are, right where Netanyahu wants them to be. But then, 70% of Jewish Americans vote for the Democrats. And we're progressive, and some of us are progressive except for Palestine, and some of us are, able to apply those progressive concepts even to Israel-Palestine, and they recognize, and not to mention the fact that there just aren't that many of us. And so, Netanyahu and Dermer realized it's the evangelicals, it's the white Christian evangelicals who support us in an unquestioning way, and there are a hell of a lot more of them. And they vote for the, GOP, which is the party we want to have in power anyway. And so that's where they really shifted their attention. And I think that, they're not stupid. I mean, I think that the message has gotten over to Israel that there's this movement, there's this shift among especially, young people, some, within the GOP, who are moving away from unquestioning support for Israel and typically doing it in a really disturbing anti-Semitic way. And so the Israeli government is now spending a ton of money bringing over, white evangelical influencers to share messaging with them so that they can try to fight these trends that are happening within that world. But, you know, it's very concerning stuff. In general, I would say the virulent anti-Semitism that we are seeing increasingly from the Nick Fuentes and Candace Owens and those that are within their sphere of influence. I mean, there have been recent estimates that something like 30 to 40% of young MAGA folks working in official circles here in DC are Groypers.
Yep.
Um, this is pretty scary stuff. And this is where I have been calling out the, leadership, the official leadership of the Jewish community, of legacy organizations who have been spending all of their time, trying to maintain uncritical support for Israel. I mean, so I think you mentioned Sarah Hurwitz.
Yeah.
And Sarah Hurwitz got attention for comments that she made at the Jewish Federations of North
Oh.
America, their big general assembly, right? And she made these comments that Holocaust education has led Jewish youth astray because they learn about the Holocaust and then they misapply those lessons of the Holocaust and think that there shouldn't, that Israel, they feel bad for Palestinians who are subject to genocide because they learned that genocide was bad.
And Sarah Hurwitz was Michelle Obama's speechwriter, like an otherwise intelligent woman, a liberal. But when it comes to their understanding of Zionism and defense of Israel, the type of mental gymnastics
Yeah.
and in the inability to realize how terrible they sound and look and how much worse they're making it for themselves and their cause.
Yeah. And so, so the point that I really wanted to make here, and we could take apart, there's a lot to take apart from that conference, including the fact that Rahm Emanuel spoke. If you want to
Yep.
talk about dinosaurs in the Democratic Party that should move on. But this is where the sort of Jewish establishment is focusing when there are real, oh, and I should mention the ADL, of course, there
Or
are really serious threats to Jewish Americans, which, by the way, are connected to the threats to Muslim Americans, to African Americans, to LGBTQ Americans. And what we need to be doing is focusing on creating coalitions,
Yep.
right? Rather than trying to tear down Zoran Mamdani.
Well, Deb, let's link it all together. And I think a linchpin that could link all of this together and show in what a bad place we're in is Nick Fuentes. I've been following this for a while. As you know, for 15 years, I
Yeah.
did not want to, but I wrote this report called Fear Incorporated: The Roots of the Islamophobia Network in America for the Center for American Progress, that revealed this incestuous, powerful ecosystem that creates and mainstreams these Islamophobic talking points. And at that time, the fringe on the right, the fringe, created this to attack Obama. What I warned when I published that for the Center for American Progress is that you should do a sequel because this is a transnational movement. I want people to re-listen to this. I said this 15 years ago. This is a transnational global movement that is not just interested in Islamophobia and hating Muslims, but hate has gone intersectional, I said. They hate Jews, Latinos, women, Black people, LGBTQ. And furthermore, even if Donald Trump, then I said, fast forward, they kept bringing me for speeches. I said, even if Donald Trump loses, this white nationalist movement is transcendent and ascendant, and they're piggybacking off each other. Hungary, Israel, United States, Europe, right? Same talking points, same people. People are like, whatever, watch. We just wanted to protect Obama and he won again, so it doesn't matter, right? Now you have a Nick Fuentes. I remember 2.5 years ago when Kanye did his anti-Semitic post. Remember the House Judiciary praised Elon and Kanye. Remember that tweet? It was Elon, Kanye, Trump.
I do remember. Oh.
Yeah, and then when Kanye met Trump, if you all recall, he brought along this young chap, Nick Fuentes, who at that time was already infamous for being further to the right of Charlie Kirk, a racist. I'm going to call him for what he was, a racist and extremist, and dragging Charlie Kirk for not being right wing enough. And at that time, Nick Fuentes and the Groypers came into, if you will, notoriety because they used to go against not just Charlie Kirk, but Ben Shapiro. And Ben Shapiro and the Daily Wire because they called him a cuck and part of the Jewish plot, Zionist occupied government, yada, 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 yada. Now, Nick Fuentes and Kanye West meet Donald Trump 2.5 years ago for dinner. At that time, I'm like, I tried to sound the alarms, Deb. I'm like, you all don't know who Nick Fuentes is. Marjorie Taylor Greene is coming to his events. Paul Gosar, he's openly an anti-Semite, white nationalist, says Hitler was based, makes jokes about the Holocaust. I said, folks, don't ignore this. The fact that Donald Trump is meeting with this guy. Donald Trump was asked 2.5 years ago to condemn Nick Fuentes, didn't do it. I think the only article that was written about it was The Guardian. Hugh wrote this article where he did some research, and he internally, Donald Trump didn't condemn Nick Fuentes because he realized it would hurt him with his base.
Mm.
Okay. Now, you fast forward to what you mentioned, the year is 2025. I have said, Deb, and I think it's been proven in the past 2 weeks, that what Nick Fuentes represents to Groypers is the present and future of the GOP. Like you said, when these young Republicans in their late 30s and 20s, when the 2,900 pages of Telegram messages were revealed, they sound like Groypers, folks. They said stuff like, I'm quoting them, I love Hitler. Rape is epic. 1488, which is a white nationalist slogan to defend the white race, right? Throwing people into the ovens. You saw them trying to make swastika not into a hate symbol in the Coast Guard just 2 weeks ago. You see them promote remigrate, which is a Nazi term for ethnic cleansing. When Don Jr. was recently asked to condemn Nick Fuentes, he didn't. When Donald Trump was asked, he didn't. Katie Miller, Stephen Miller's Jewish wife, last week on CNN was asked to condemn Nick Fuentes, didn't. Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes used to go at it, but he realized, oh, I see where the wind is blowing. They had a rapprochement, if you will. And then Heritage Foundation, which is very influential and published Project 2025, sided with Tucker Carlson, wink, wink, also Nick Fuentes, right? I want you all to know that Nick Fuentes is a neo-Nazi. And he, for the past, this is one of those world's worst I told you so's. 2 years ago, Deb, I said this Israel crisis, now genocide, is being exploited by white Christian nationalists, by neo-Nazis, to increase both Islamophobia and antisemitism for their own goal. Tommy Robinson, who is a neo-Nazi in England, is pro-Israel. Nick Fuentes, if you listen to isolated clips, you think he's a very passionate young defender of Palestinians. They don't care about any of us. When asked Nick Fuentes, how about Muslims? Are they part of your future? No, Muslims will have to leave. Tucker Carlson, very passionate now about Palestinians, but at the same time says, how come England's no longer white? Promotes the replacement theory, right? So this is happening in real time. And I have to ask you this, is these Jewish groups, I've been warning them for 15 years, so 12 years ever since I went to Israel. I'm like, your alliance with white Christian nationalists, you don't understand where these people are going. I see it. And they're like, it's just political. And now you see Laura Loomer. Do you see Laura Loomer's tweet from last week?
No.
The GOP has a Nazi problem.
Mm.
So Ben Shapiro now is like, oh, these guys are bad. I'm like, you created this monster. And then going back to your point, even with all this, Stop Antisemitism release its top 10 antisemites lists. And Deb, I would say, okay, Nick Fuentes should be, I don't know, number one, number two. Nick Fuentes is not on the list. Can you tell him who made the list?
Ms. Rachel.
Explain this to me, Deb.
Oh, I'm not. In no way am I going to justify this for you to watch. Let me be very clear, and I've said this on social media. Ms. Rachel, as far as I'm concerned, like her mentor, Mr. Rogers, who I grew up with, and I'm sure you did too. She's the best of us. Her dedication to children, whether they are, Israeli children who are victims of October 7th, whether they are Palestinian children who have had limbs amputated in Gaza as a result of the genocide, whether they're in DRC or Sudan or whatever, or here in the United States. This is a woman who clearly is a humanitarian who just absolutely loves children and who cannot stand at the core of her being to see anyone hurt them, and who, like many Americans, is not happy with the fact that her tax dollars are being used not for SNAP benefits, but instead for weapons that are sent to facilitate that are used in the war crimes that we have seen in Gaza. And so, yes, so here we have this awful, it's an awful group that's been around for some years now. I haven't looked into their funding in a little while. I know, so I'm not sure if this is current to be very clear. At some point, I know they received a lot of money from the Milstein Family Foundation. This is Adam Milstein, who also gave a ton of money to AIPAC. And, and their whole thing is like we see from, a lot of, unfortunately, establishment Jewish organizations, including the ADL, which is making anti-Semitism all about, putting the anti-Semitism label on anyone who does not take an uncritical pro-Israel stance. And so they, it's fascinating. I mean, Ms. Rachel, because of who she is, and because if anyone spends any time watching her with your kids or otherwise, you can just see this innate humanity and goodness that emulates from her. And the fact that she has taken on the cause of children, Palestinian children who have been harmed in Gaza, a group like Stop Antisemitism realizes that this is really bad PR. And so they have accused her of taking money from Hamas. Those accusations were baseless accusations without any evidence, were then taken up and printed as accusations in the New York Times. Ms. Rachel has said that this has endangered her family. It's terrified her children. Um, and I mean, what can I say? My heart goes out to her, and I appreciate the work that she does.
But you talk about terrible PR, right? And I'm noticing just America, Israel, it's a defenders, uncritical defenders, just Brexit, right? When Brexit happened, it was like you see them completely high, drinking alcohol, pouring alcohol and themselves with a match, driving a Porsche 90 miles per hour into a brick wall. And the rest of us are like, you don't have to do this. And like, no, 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 we must. We must in order to feel great again. I'm like, no, bro, please get out of the car, right? That's the rest of us. And they just seem hell bent on self destruction. Brexit, what
Mm.
Trump is doing with the remigration, end birthright citizenship, make America white again. And then what Israel's doing is I sit there and I go, literally, you're following a playbook to make the world hate you. You're amplifying the world's worst conspiracy. Bill Ackman, a billionaire, openly talking about working with other billionaires to crush Palestinians on Twitter is a wet dream of anti-Semites. Larry Ellison and David Ellison using their insane amount of money to gobble up Paramount, CBS, and then TikTok, and now Netflix, is all the worst anti-Semitic dreams come true, right? Stop Anti-Semitism, saying that Miss Rachel is a top 10 anti-Semite, but Nick Fuentes, because he's good with the right wing, isn't. Like, do you not realize you're destroying Israel, Jews, Palestinians, and also helping the worst people who also hate Black people, Latinos, gay people, women, and Muslims.
Yep.
Deb, what do we do?
What do? We lead. We lead in a different direction. I mean, and that means that sometimes you and I need to speak uncomfortable truths to our own communities, and we have to show another way forward. And we have to, and so I've been making the argument, and you've been making the argument, that this is the time for a multicultural, multiracial coalition to try to save democracy in this country, and to take on, a government that is increasingly looking pretty damn fascist. And the only thing I think that the way forward is just to show that there's another path, and to lead the way, and to hopefully inspire others to join along.
I agree. And you've gone heat. I don't know if you've gone as much heat as I have over the past many years. It's okay. Um, I, you know, to end this next 5 minutes, I don't want to take too much of your time. And thank you to nearly 1,500 people who are joining. I'm talking to Debra Shushan. Please subscribe to her Substack, and also she's an expert on Israel, Palestine, and foreign policy, and also used to formerly be with J Street. Is very critical of the Israeli government. Calls it what's happening, occupation, genocide, which I think is very important, especially for Jewish Americans who take their community and their religion and tradition very seriously. For people to hear that, just like it's very important for when white people speak out against white supremacy, and for Muslims to speak out against, racism, extremism, violent Muslim jihadists. I think it's very important. You need that multicultural coalition. But we're in this situation where I got in trouble, as you know, because I saw this like 14 years ago. And I realized, many of the Jewish American groups who were liberal on everything, as Peter Beinart says, progressive on everything except Palestine,
Right.
that they were funding the worst Islamophobes. And you see this right now. I'll unite with these open anti-Semites because they'll crush Palestinians. I'll unite with these open anti-Semites because they'll help Israel, even though for the most naked, shameless, white supremacist, white Christian nationalist endgame. I'll unite with literal Nazis because you know what? They hate Muslims like I do. And then you see now some Muslims saying, hey, man, Nick Fuentes, is he really a Nazi? But he's really good on Palestine. Oh, hate Tucker Carlson. Maybe he's changed. I'm like, they have it. For the love of God, no, they hate all of us. The end game is to remove all of us, right? And so I got in trouble, as you know, because I tried to make some inroads within those Jewish communities that still call themselves Zionist and liberal. It's all changing and evolving for the past 12 years. I got accused of being a traitor. And like many of us, there's certain people, not majority, who wanted to make an example out of me. And what they said was, we need your scalp. That was the exact words. And I'm like, I like my scalp. And they said, we need to make an example out of you to show that, this is the narrative and it's power. You know this also in your community. We're in control. We represent the Jews. It's us, and everyone else is an outsider and a threat. I'm sure this happens with the ADL and APAC and anyone who goes against it. You know this. It's very similar. And so the Jews who were seeing this were like, wow, this is really comforting. I'm like, why? I'm getting boycotted. They're like, no, because this happens in our community, and we thought we were crazy. You're just as crazy as us. Uh, and, because the fear is, as you know, we can't give an inch. We can't give an inch on empathy, on humanity, on land, on language, on food. It's zero sum game. Everything will fall apart. And I've said, okay, I get it, but some of us who don't necessarily are part of these leadership groups, some of us who are independent, we have to at least try to chart something,
Yeah.
because if we're at loggerheads, what people don't realize, it's not going to be perfect. I'm not agree with everything you say, most likely, even though we've agreed on a lot every time we've talked. But what people don't realize is you have to venture into some of these spaces and create some alliances without giving up your values and morality, because they're coming for all of us, Deb. They're
Mhm.
coming for all of us. And right now, what they're doing very successfully is a divide and conquer around Israel, anti-Semitism, and Islamophobia. That's my last 2 cents, but I defer to you to give you the final word.
Yeah, look, I'll say, maybe I'll say as a final word one thing, on in addition to forming coalitions. Obviously Muslims and Jews in particular, I think, is, one thing that that I always want to emphasize when I have the wonderful opportunity to speak with you. um the one thing that I'll also share, as someone who tries to have productive conversations within my own community, is that I do also think it's important when trying to win hearts and minds within our communities, when we're dealing with someone who at least shows some openness to views that are not what they are used to and grew up with, that sometimes one does need to, you know, do do things like, for example, if I'm, not use the word genocide when, if I'm speaking to someone of my parents' generation who is just starting to get their head around the idea that Israel maybe didn't, act as a good neighbor to Palestinians over the last 2 years. I would maintain that in the, for the purpose, I mean, in order to really foster dialogue and bring folks along and listen also to what those folks have to say, it's important. It's okay to speak in a certain way within one's community. I mention this because I once got in trouble in a public forum where someone in the audience made a comment about, the most important thing being getting people to use the word genocide. Now, you have heard me use the word genocide. I have never taken someone to task for using the word genocide. But I also would just, make a note that it's important to meet people where they are and start, and listen to them and bring them along. And that's okay. That's also a reasonable thing to do.
And it's not
Um,
for everyone. It's not for everyone, Deb, and that's important too because that's what I did. I met people where they are, and it was very
yeah,
difficult, but I spent time with it. And sometimes it worked, and sometimes it didn't. And it's not for everyone. Everyone has a different role to play. Everyone has different roles to play. That's very important as well. Some people work in the political space. Some people work in the community activist space. Some people work in the media space. Some people they can't be, I've said this to folks, they can't be rah, rah, rah. They live in a community with these folks. Like they go to school with these folks, right? Like, so you can be rah, rah, rah in New York, but imagine being a brown skinned Arab or a Muslim in like really white Southern MAGA Alabama. I've talked to these folks,
yeah,
or like it'll be the only Palestinian or only Pakistani Muslim, like three families amongst white folks and, center left Jewish folks in Youngstown. I talked to those communities. So, you have to meet people where you are, but it's not for everyone. Do what you can. But I think it is important if you live in this type of isolationism and if you batten down the hatches and you make alliances with the worst people just because they gave you a little bit of lift on one issue, these people, folks, they hate us. The end game is me and Deb out. That's the end game. The end game is, oh, we'll use them to attack each other. Great. Oh, they've been weakened. Awesome. Now we're in power. Get the F out. And for
yeah,
those who don't know the white Christian nationalist story, the story goes like this: Jews have to control Jerusalem as a necessary precondition for Jesus to come back.
yeah,
Once Jesus comes back, Jesus looks at the Jews and says, convert or die. Jews are like, wait, what? No, die. Then he goes to the Muslims and says, are you going to convert or die? We're going to say, no, die. So in the end game, Jews and Muslims die. And in the white nationalist endgame, as Nick Fuentes and others have openly said, once we get power, oh yeah, Jews go to Israel, and Muslims, you could be either subordinate or you can leave.
yeah, yeah. And amazingly, one thing that just happened, I think within the past few weeks, months, something like that, Mike Huckabee, who is white evangelical Christian, who is the U.S. ambassador to Israel, uh, actually gave a speech at a church, an evangelical organization that has a beautiful facility overlooking the Mount of Olives in Jerusalem that is well known for proselytizing Jews. And
Mm.
spoke there in this, evangelical language about converting Jews, which, especially converting Jews in Jerusalem is part of that whole project. And, it's amazing because these are folks who are wholeheartedly embraced by the Israeli government because of their, support for Israel. So,
And
yeah,
also, Mike Huckabee dined with Jonathan Pollard, American convicted for spying in Israel, in July. And that was not on his official schedule. So he has his own white Christian nationalist agenda that he's doing on taxpayer dollars dimes. Uh, Folks, that's the end game. You know the plot. It's going to be tough conversations. Don't fall for the okey doke. Don't fall for the divide and conquer technique. It's going to weaken all of our communities. And when it comes to, Muslim versus Jewish, you could be like, well, I'm not Muslim. I don't care. I'm a Christian. I'm an Arab Christian. They don't care. We're all the same to them. I'm not Palestinian. They don't care. Mehdi Hassan's not Palestinian. They don't care. Ilhan Omar is black woman. They don't care. They don't care. They're going after everyone. Anyone who isn't pure enough is seen as a traitor, a race traitor. Anyone who helps is seen as a traitor, an Antifa. They're coming after all of us, folks. That's the end game. That's white supremacy and fascist end game. They come after everyone at the end. So I hope people realize this. Don't fall for it. Don't fall for it. Don't fall for it. There is a better way forward. Thank you, Deb, for always these conversations. I always want to keep you for 30 minutes, but then I learn a lot and I keep you going and I kept you for longer than an hour. Before you leave, let's do something that Muslims and Jews, especially children of immigrants, are terrible at. Promote yourself shamelessly.
thank you. I'm happy to. So, folks, I have a Substack here. It's called The Debrief with Debra Shushan, and I regularly have folks on for conversations that I think will be interesting and illuminating, and would love to have you join. I also publish commentaries from time to time, and so would love for folks to subscribe.
So are subscribing to the Left Hook, please subscribe to Deb. She's fantastic. And if you are a free subscriber to the Left Hook, everything's free. There's no paywalls. I'm a terrible capitalist. I had this holiday sale up, and it went really well. All these free subscribers became paid subscribers, Deb. And so it's because it's still like, I think it's 25% off. And so it's only cost $5 a month, but now it's like 375 at $38 a month. And people in this economy said, that really helped them. And those who were
Mhm.
free subscribers that I wanted to come on and help and help you. So that's it right there. The lefthook.substack.com/discount. Everything is free. If you have no money, I get it. But if you want to help, it's independent. I've kept everything without paywall. It's about $3.75 a month up until the new year. It goes a long way. Please subscribe. Thanks, Deb. For those who joined us late, nearly 1,600 people, this will be up on my Substack, The Left Hook, and Deb's Substack later today. We talk about why it's so important for Muslim and Jewish American communities and our allies to come together. We recognize the threats both abroad and at home. We talk about the failure of the old school democratic establishment that is digging its heel in a failed narrative. We talk about new way forward for some people who are realizing where the wind is shifting, the Mamdanis, Rokanas, and others. And we talk about folks like Nick Fuentes, the Nazis, who are playing for a end game that does not include people like me and Deb and our communities. So we have the numbers. There's more of us than there are of them, but we have to organize, folks. Once we organize, we could do amazing things. Thank you, Deb. Hopefully, we can talk sooner rather than later. Everyone, be kind, be decent, and please, oh, please, don't be a fascist.
Thank you.